Okay, so if you're a gamer and you haven't been living under a rock for the past few years, then you're probably pretty familiar with the fact that a lot of video game companies and even tech companies now are working on services for streaming our video games because they all feel as though that's the future we're moving towards. And that very well could be the truth. It just depends on how quickly we'll get there. It might be even further out because as of right now, we've got Google Stadia entering the market, which is its own new independent streaming platform. We've got Project xCloud, which is Microsoft's streaming service for Xbox games on multiple devices. That'll be coming soon. And then we've currently got PlayStation Now in the market, which is Sony's initiative to stream PS2, PS3, and PS4 games on current PS4 consoles and even PC. And what I wanted to do was finally give PlayStation Now a fair chance. And so for a little over a week, that's all I did was streamed games on PlayStation Now. That was my one way to play games for a little over a week. But more so, how I did it was with two different internet speeds. One that was on the high end and one that was on the low end. And what I mean by that is when I started doing this week-long review, my internet service was really poor. And I was paying for the plan that I had with my ISP. I was supposed to be getting about 30 megabits down, but I was really getting about 5 to 10, sometimes a little bit in the middle there, but it was pretty slow. I mean, that's decent, it's good, it was serviceable. I mean, I was doing YouTube on that internet connection, I was playing games online and things like that, but PlayStation Now, officially on Sony's website, Sony recommends about 5 megabits down. So in theory, that should have been fine. But what I did halfway into that week was, and I had planned this the whole time, obviously, but was that I was going to call my ISP, and I was actually, at the time, also going to be removing services anyway, because I had a bundled deal with voice, cable, and things like that. So basically, I was cable cutting at this time. So I did PlayStation Now for a little bit with that slow speed, but then I made my call, got my new modem, got rid of my cable, thank God, about time I did that. And now I'm getting about 100 megabits down, which is great. So I did a little bit of PlayStation Now on that as well, where you would assume the service would work quite well. But anyway, that's enough of me on camera. From here on out, it's going to be just PlayStation Now footage and my week-long experience with the service. Take a look. Initially, I was pretty optimistic about PlayStation Now, and that's coming from someone who, if I could, I'd buy physical games until the day I die. But at heart, I give everything a fair shot. Starting the PlayStation Now application is pretty straightforward. It's on everyone's PS4s, and at this point it's likely buried so much to where you need to manually search for it in your library. But upon startup and entering the service, you'll notice something almost immediately, and that's that the UI is without a doubt incredibly uninspired, bland, and just straight boring. I mean, yes, it certainly gets the job done in the sense that it's simplistic. Categories are broken down well, from genre to platform to even exclusives. You can quickly add games to the section labeled Your Games for quick access, you can search for a game, or just straight up hit all games and start scrolling. Yes, you could in theory just alphabetically work your way through the 750 plus games PlayStation Now has to offer. I guess the two big issues with the UI in general is lack of presentation, but more importantly discovery. While the service will make an attempt to suggest titles to you, it seems to only cherry pick big budget well-known games. Which is fine if you want to be pleasantly surprised about what games you have access to, but I would have liked a more tailored experience that tries to find games that I might not have heard about. And yes, the UI could certainly use a facelift with a little more soul. The general feel of the application is very Netflix 2008, and definitely needs to be sprung forward to today's standards. When you select a game, you have the option to stream now, add it to your list, or download it locally to your hard drive if it's a PS2 or PS4 game. You cannot download PS3 games, and that is because PS3 games are not natively supported on your PS4, whereas the PS2 games are being emulated and even sold separately on the PlayStation Store with trophy support. Albeit the PS2 selection is extremely small, but the games are supported. We won't focus much on the downloading aspect of PlayStation Now as we're really here to test streaming, but don't undermine this feature. Downloading the games adds an incredible value and convenience, and in all honesty, saves this service. But anyway, starting a stream is pretty easy. You go into this queued loading screen that prepares your game, and then it launches when ready, which doesn't take longer than about a minute. That may seem long, but remember, you're technically just streaming these games off another remote console that boots the game just like you normally would. Now keep in mind, my first 3 to 4 days with this service, my internet connection was floating around 5 to 10 megabits per second, and Sony recommends 5 as the very minimum to start the service. Which you would think, okay, I'm in the clear, 5 is not that much and is realistically what most people have today. Well, unsurprisingly, I wasn't having a good time. Compression is immediately obvious, and I'm going to do the best I can to convey this on YouTube. Sometimes it's very subtle, and at its worst, it's so blurred that you'd think you're watching a 240p YouTube video from 2005, where the top comment is asking why this was filmed with a potato. Assuming it's not that bad though, it's more noticeable with text and menus where it's visibly not sharp or refined. And if you think the image quality is poor to simply provide you with low latency to keep the gameplay intact, then you're in for a rude awakening. The input delay is there, and boy oh boy is it bad. I mean, at times it felt like it was almost off by half a second, and I genuinely tried to play games like this. Nah, that wasn't happening. I could barely catch monkeys or jump over ledges in Ape Escape. Using a gun in Bioshock was a nigh impossible task, and I had to resort to the wrench and sometimes hitting splicers with the Electrobolt Plasmid.
Charlie, where you going? No, Charlie!
But one thing you might notice about a lot of my PlayStation Now footage is that a lot of these games are within the first hour or so, sometimes even less, and there's a few reasons for that. One thing being I wanted to try a variety of games. 2, the save files are completely separate from locally stored saves, even if you've already played the game before. And 3, I got kicked off. A lot. After a while, if your connection just isn't cutting it, you're simply given the boot. A countdown in the top right tells you that your speeds are insufficient and that the game will close once it hits 0. Why does it do this? Because the service is encouraging you to save your game. Yes, you've got a matter of 30 seconds or so to save your progress before you get Spartan kicked out of there. For games that don't really allow saving that quickly, you're pretty much screwed. I suppose the courtesy is nice, but 30 seconds definitely isn't a one-size-fits-all for attempting to save your progress. So basically, after a while, this is what kept happening to me. If my connection started to dip too close to 5 megabits per second or under, I was thrown out. Now the thing is, there are some remedies you can do to improve your situation, from messing around with your router settings to moving your PS4 or connecting via Ethernet, but the fact is, I wanted to try and use this service the same way anyone else would. Remember the first time you used Netflix or Hulu and it just worked? If streaming games is the future, they need to do the same thing. You shouldn't have to think about it or do something to make it better. The worldwide internet download speed average in 2017 was around 7.2 megabits per second. This is the reality of where we are. If PlayStation Now is recommending 5, and Google Stadia is going to be recommending 25, then this upcoming push for streaming games has their work cut out for them. Even when you have more developed countries averaging around 20 megabits per second, that's still not going to be enough for Stadia. And what was disappointing about PlayStation Now is that 5 download is what's considered the green light to start streaming. I met that requirement, and my experience was awful. Initially, when you go to the PlayStation Store to try PS Now, the service makes you run a connection test to warn you if you're even capable of using it, which I felt was pretty consumer friendly, that way no one buys into something that they can't use. But they're letting you pass with a minimum that quite frankly isn't going to be a good experience at all, and that's what's frustrating. So what is PlayStation Now like when you finally have a good connection? My day came when I called my ISP to return my modem and cable boxes. Finally getting 100 down. You have no idea how happy I was to finally go internet only. I was now getting anywhere from 80 to 117 megabits per second consistently. The results? Better, but still not great. It was at this point where I seriously considered something was still wrong on my end, but sure enough, games started fine, I was never kicked out, and speed tests directly on the PS4 showed I was good to go. But immediately compression is noticeable, with the ever so slight input lag. It was to the point to where you could play the game, but something just didn't feel right. And as I played and tried more precise games like first-person shooters, it just felt off. And it was at this point where I took advantage of downloading games to play them locally off the hard drive. I had already spent 6 days trying to stream games. Now, the second I booted up a game that I had downloaded that I had already previously tried to stream, it was as if I was jumping generations. The screen was clear, and the game controlled just as you'd expect. Now, that's not really an eye-opening revelation, but the thing that was eye-opening is the download mechanic. To me, this saves the service. Sure, a slower connection means you'll be downloading large files, but once that's done, you've got the game living on your hard drive, always ready to play for as long as you have an active PlayStation Now membership. And that brings me to this point, which is that before I even tried to stream a game, and I was just browsing through the PlayStation Now catalog, something hit me. It was a certain level of excitement I hadn't had in a while. Once again, I ask, remember the first time you had access to Netflix? And really think about this. It was probably this overwhelming feeling. To see all these TV shows and movies at your disposal, it was really exciting. And that's what I was feeling, seeing 750 plus games and just knowing that if I wanted to, I could start playing whichever one I wanted. Basically what I'm saying is, as someone who loves having physical games as a collection, the streaming dream is still alive, and you won't feel it until it's right there in front of you. I just hope that by the time that actually happens, the streaming service you try actually works. Because PlayStation Now has a lot of promise, it really does. There's a huge library that keeps getting bigger, the monthly subscription, while steep to many, is still technically a bargain in the world of video games, and that oh-so-crucial download feature almost makes it worth it by itself. I mean, honestly, Sony might be better off playing up that feature more until they work on the latency, and also just waiting for home internet speeds to increase. As it stands right now, I'm not convinced. The thing you have to realize is that every publisher, manufacturer, and tech company, they're moving in fast so that one of them can be the market leader in this space. Getting to market first with the right tech is key, but all of these companies might be moving in too fast as they quickly realize streaming is for a minority of consumers with high-speed connections, so they might be waiting a long time until the rest of the world catches up. At any rate, PlayStation Now is practically unplayable at the recommended speeds, and passable at best with speeds that far exceed that minimum. I'm sure I could improve it with home remedies or Ethernet, but not everybody is going to be willing to jump through those hoops to hopefully have a good experience. For now, I'll happily be buying and downloading games until I'm shown a service that can match the quality and latency of local play. And PlayStation Now is not that service. Thank you so much for watching this video, I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you have not yet, of course, subscribe for the best PlayStation news reviews and updates here on YouTube, and follow along on Twitter at MysticRyan. That's pretty much it for me in this video, and I will see you all in my next one. You take it easy.